Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your midday market report for Thursday, May 12th, 2022. Our weekly trip across the border with the one and only Mr. Andrew McInnis of McGinnis Picks of Wager Talk. And yes, it's Thursday, not Wednesday like we usually do. I had to take a quick trip to stores again, bring my daughter back as she gets ready to go to Aruba as dad stays home in this cold, rainy, raw weather. And she will be living large as her last little getaway as she has graduated UConn. But our guest today, I tell you, he's going to be in his glory right now. The NHL has been off the charts. We have the potential, I said, of 7 game 7s. And I know he will have a say in a few of these matters. And let's bring him in to see what he has to say. I'm wondering how he has done in the last week. And we got an amazing, beautiful board today. Technically, all 4 games you can easily go into any side. And I know he'll have a few angles for sure. So let's bring him in. Mr. Andrew McInnis.
Mr. Dawson.
Andrew, how are you?
Well, as we talked about off air briefly, or you mentioned, I'm not at the Garden like you. Actually, I'm on the links, and I'm just inspired by the nice day out. And honestly, the only background I had already in my StreamYard program was at the Bell Center, and unfortunately, I can't be at the Bell Center this time of year. Number 1 draft pick for next year, but as of right now, I'm just out on the links. So my team is on the links golfing. Of course, your team is still in action tonight, so that's why I'm out here on the golf course behind me. But it's a great day. The playoffs, it's already been great, but the elimination games are what I live for, Jeff. I'm sure same with you. That's where it gets fun. The elimination games, the game 6s, the game 7s, that's where it starts to get fun.
Well, I will say this tongue in cheek. I might need to borrow your backdrop after tonight at around 10 o'clock tonight. um, Hockey's a game of inches, and Florida 2 days ago, right? Today's Thursday. They played yesterday. On Monday, was within a quarter of an inch of being down 3-1. And they miraculously, the puck does not go in, and they score a minute later, and they win in overtime. Last night, they give the Caps not a 1, not a 2, but a 3-goal lead. And you talked about this last week. You says, hey, listen, it's easy to do it's not easy, but this team was 3 and 4 goals down in the regular season, and they just were like, okay, and they turned on a switch and would come flying back. In the playoffs, that's different. But they did it again last night.
That's what's, unique about this team. It's what's great about this team. But also, I mean, like you mentioned, we talked about it last week. It's also what's bad about this team. Happy for Claude Giroux, though. He was suffering on the Philadelphia Flyers. He's now in the playoffs with the Florida Panthers. And, hey, big goal for him. But, I said yesterday, did that series really feel like it was tied up? Because to me, it didn't feel like it was at all. I mean, it didn't feel like a close series, going into it. I mean, all the momentum was on the Washington Capitals side, I thought, and even the opening odds yesterday, I didn't think that they deserved to be what they did. As much as I thought Florida would give a good effort, I just, you look at some of the games right now and the adjustments from the odds makers, as you would say, they're kind of begging you to take the other side, so to speak. But a very interesting series. I'm excited to see what happens near the end, and excited to see what we see as far as totals. And that series really intrigues me, Jeff, as far as the total market goes, just because in a split of a second, we could see 3 goals between those two teams. But we could also see both goaltenders stand on their head for a period and a half. So totals are so weird in the playoffs because it's kind of like soccer, I found, where you could have an over 2.5 in a soccer game, 82nd minute, you see a goal happen, boom, floodgates open up, the game finishes 3-1. It's just unbelievable how that works in that sport. And now with the NHL playoffs, I'm kind of finding the same thing. I'm not really worried about an over until late in the third period. You just can't. Yesterday I had over in the Pittsburgh game, 2-0, 5:33 left in the second period. Second period ends 3-3. You got to love that kind of stuff.
And I was listening early this morning. It was Paulie and Mike Palm. Mitch was off on visa, and they were talking about the overs in the third period, and they're just coming in like clockwork. And most of the coaches don't care if they lose by 4 or 5 goals. They're pulling the goalies with 5 minutes to go. They don't care. It's just a loss. And in the regular season, hey, they pull the goalie, the other team scores, and now they're down 2. In comes the goalie for the last minute and a half. 5 minutes to go, they pull the goalie, they're down 3 now. The goalie's still out.
Well, you look at that Nashville and Colorado series. The last game of that series was first period, 1 goal apiece. Second period, 1 goal apiece, I believe. Third period just absolutely went bananas. And if you want to take the 1.5 over, you can eat the juice. It's probably well worth it some of the times. But that 2.5, Jeff, was upwards of plus 125, 130. So it's well worth it in some of these games. And the funny thing is that a lot of people still can't bet third period overs prior to the game. I know some sports books do allow you to. I believe FanDuel does. I think DraftKings has it sometimes. But the ability to do that, because the funny thing is, depending on the game flow, you might get better or worse odds if you bet that pre-game. But one thing I will say is that yesterday, I did try that in the Rangers game, but I went a lot smaller than I usually would have. And it's because it was 2-2, tied going in. To me, the picture perfect setup for an in-game over in elimination games is if you go into a third period with one team up by 1 goal. And hopefully it's the team that has the series lead. Tonight, if we see that happen, I mean, I'd love to see tonight the Kings be up 3-2 in the third period, and it just be absolute mayhem, between those two clubs. So it should be interesting. And in-game betting right now in the NHL playoffs is just it's a lot of fun. But I know that you cashed a ticket yesterday on Florida. Unfortunately, I was on the sidelines, but I thought about getting in on the in-game number, Jeff. But I just didn't think that number was good enough. And it turned out whatever the number was, it was worth the bet.
I send out 2 to 3 emails to potential new clients. We send out about 25,000 a day. And I reached out the night before looking for that number for the Panthers in regulation. And thank you for getting that to me. And so I'll be honest with you, I probably got 25, 30 emails once it was 3-0. Now, these guys, I don't know them from Adam. And they're like, wow, you're good, pal. Nice pick, pal.
Yeah.
And they're just one after another. And that's why I hate the free picks. Here's why. It's a lose-lose situation because if you win, you were supposed to win because we're the professionals, we're the experts. When you lose, we know shit, and so but they come all the way back. They win 5-3, and I'm a hero. And all those 25, 30 people that were chirping, they're nowhere to be found now.
And that does not surprise me in the slightest. Can't believe the puck line ended up hitting as well there, Jeff. That's a crazy hit. But, it's just how it is. I get it. I mean, my rant for you will be that we do our show Monday through Friday, our hockey show. And because it's the playoffs, there's bets I like every night, but we're selling picks and there's only so many games now and they're all big games. So I've elected to just do props as my, quote for quote, best bet segment at the end of our show. Last Monday, playoff start, people are furious. Why are you doing props? What's going on with these prop bets? I want totals. I want sides. I'm 7-1 on these props since the playoffs started on the show, and nobody has said a word. And I was like, where are all the people that hated on props? If we're sitting here in 2022 in May and you shop somewhere that doesn't offer props, it's not really my problem.
I'm going to paint a gloomy picture because this is what I see. It's just what my gut tells me. Penguins opened up minus 125 on the series. By the time they opened up, they dropped the puck in the first game. Rangers were minus 115 in that series. 1-1 going to Pittsburgh. The Rangers were favored in both those games. Pittsburgh gets a touchdown in both those games. Pittsburgh comes back to the Rangers now, up 3-1. They score the first two goals, and that was it. Supposed to end that way. And of course, the Rangers come back. Of course, Sidney Crosby gets hurt, doesn't come back. So I'm going to paint the doom and gloom. It's now 3-2. They're going back to Pittsburgh, and Sidney doesn't play game 6. I don't know if he's playing or he's not playing. I'm just painting the gloomy picture.
Right.
Do you see a game 7 in the horizon here?
I think we potentially could, but I still truthfully, and I know this is someone that has investments already with Pittsburgh, but I saw a small glimpse of what the secondary scoring can be for the Rangers in that game. No doubt about it. But from a large sample size, besides Jake Gensel, who is unbelievable, with 7 goals in this series already, there's just a handful of guys scoring for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm not saying it's just 1 or 2 guys that are doing it for the Rangers, but I just love how it's almost like you put a bunch of names in a hat, Jeff, and you pick one, and that's who's going to score for the Penguins. But with the good goaltending and with strong defensive play and filling those minutes, it's going to be tough for the Pittsburgh Penguins if Crosby's out. And, they're very secretive about that stuff in hockey. It's not like in the NBA where they'll say, yeah, he got a scratch on his left thumb. He's going to be out for 2.5 years. It's day-to-day injury, and they'll let you know on the morning skate or if that, so that to me is confusing for us as sports bettors. But one thing that I'll tell people is that whether or not it's Crosby in the lineup or not, you got to think about it as if that's 17, 18 minutes that have to be filled. That to me is the biggest concern. But if there was a team to lose a superstar in the playoffs right now that to not concern me, honestly, it would be them, because I really see 2 or 3 lines, that are playing very well. If I saw a couple different teams in the league, lose their best player or their captain, I think I would react a little bit worse than I will with the Penguins.
All right.
What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think though you need to. I just am fear of the Ranger goalie finally spinning one in Pittsburgh. And, now you got the game 7, all the pressure on them, and the public money that was all on the Rangers because the wrong team was favored. They're going to get awarded with a game 7 at home. And we know Sheturkin, if he's hot, he can be a stonewall. And next thing you know, the Rangers win the last 3 and they're moving on.
Well, I think that like we have no idea what's going on with Crosby exactly. We can't guess. But what I will say I know for a fact is that the second that he went out, well, I shouldn't say I know for a fact. I didn't talk to anybody with the team, but I think that it was precautionary. If that was a game 7, 10 minutes to go in the third period, I think Sidney Crosby is saying, hey, if I'm allowed to, I'm staying out there right now. The fact that they had that 3-1 cushion in the series, they had the lead at the time in the game too. That makes it a bit different. But hey, can the Rangers win 3 straight games? It's possible. I think that game in Pittsburgh is the biggest one. If they win that one, it's anybody's game series to win in New York. So I look forward to it. I think it's very physical. We've talked a lot on our show about special teams this year in the playoffs. I mean, how many calls we're seeing. I feel like it's just been a runway to the penalty box. I mean, it sounds like such a simple thing to say and an obvious statement, but whichever team capitalizes on the PP the most is the team that is victorious a lot of the time right now in the postseason. So interesting to see how the referees blow the whistle in that game 6, Jeff, because I think it could play a huge factor in that series.
I'll talk about these 2, and then I'll go to the big one, and then we'll do today's card. I see the road teams have been very successful. I see a game 7 coming up, Minnesota Blues. You like the Wild tonight?
I think they'll bounce back. I think I'm on the Blues for the series, but I think we're going to get a really great effort out of the Minnesota Wild tonight. I think that one goes the distance. I really do. But I haven't been liking the prices on the Minnesota Wild. That's kind of been my biggest thing, was just like, I thought that series could have been a pick 'em, and based on experience and how they play and talk about special teams. And I was talking up Husso before the series, and now all of a sudden, Jordan Binnington, we found out he's only a playoff guy. All he needs is 16 games, apparently, to be a good player. But no, I really do think that we'll see a good effort out of Minnesota. And I talk about special teams. They have to stay disciplined. That's their biggest problem. They can't send St. Louis, a top 5 power play team in the league, on the power play. If they do that, then I feel like they will be successful as long as they're disciplined. But I also will say I think the Minnesota has to win a low scoring hockey game. If I'm Minnesota, I don't want to trade goals with the Blues. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been the king of. Have you seen the Blues in the second period? And they were just putting up field goals, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals in the second period. Well, what they did in the last game was epic. Is they scored with 4 minutes to go to end the second period, and then they scored 2 goals in the first minute and a half, and they said thanks for playing there. Once they get this thing cranked up, we talked 6 weeks ago about the Blues. We really did. And we talked about futures. And I go back to the year they beat the Bruins in the Cup and the prices that you could have got then. And even back 6 weeks ago. And I like this team. But when I saw Minnesota minus 160, that's what they opened up in the series. I'm like, come on, that is real high. Yeah. And it closed around 140. And to me, the way I read the market is, hey, they got the Blues money. They're happy now. And obviously, we need a game 7 because I'm sitting here with a Minnesota ticket. You're sitting here with a Blues ticket. So you have outs, by the way. You can sit there and even if it goes to a game 7, the price has been a little steep at Minnesota. So that makes it hard. So I say you're sitting in the catbird seat for now, but I think it goes 7.
Me too. I think that it's going to be. I think that's. Look, the Maple Leafs and Lightning series is awesome, and there's just so much that comes with it, with the pressure on the Leafs and with the back-to-back Cup champions with the Lightning. That's an awesome series. But I really think that Wild and Blues series is the most intriguing, just because when both teams are at their best, they could both play at such a high level. But if one or two mistakes happen, the entirety of the game changes. And that's what we've seen. And any victory for either team in that series has been just capitalizing on mistakes. I have to give recognition to Kirill Kaprizov for the Wild, because how many people in the league, I remember Drew Doughty taking shots at him during the regular season, the overpaid young player and that kind of stuff, talking about him. Well, he isn't just a regular season guy. We've seen that. He's shown up in the playoffs, and I think he needs some help. So I think he'll get it tonight. But I'm going to stick to my guns. I think St. Louis takes it in 7.
And, life support from McDavid tonight opened at 160, now 134. There is a 140 at Westgate. I think the NHL's hoping. I talked about after they lost game 1. I think you were on the show. I was like, they were only minus 115 after a game 1, and I was like, they're not too sure, the Oilers. And then it was 1-1, and I says Kings are going to get a split. There's no doubt in my mind. And they lose game 3, win game 4, and shock the world and come back and win game 5. Will Edmonton see a game 7?
I think they will, but I'm not confident in it. I think that when you look at the last game, you really saw the LA Kings win a game where they didn't even play their best hockey. They scored 5 goals in that game, and I believe they went 1 or 4, 1 for 5 on the power play. A lot of their players didn't execute on chances. And if I'm an LA King player, I'm going into the dressing room after the game thinking, I feel great. We're in a great position. We also didn't even play our best hockey. And if you're an Edmonton Oilers supporter or better, you have to look at that third period. Guess who scored? McDavid scores a goal. Draisaitl scores 2 goals. So nobody can blame him. Spector and the Edmonton media, he's kind of the Steve Simmons of the West Coast of Canada. He can have his fun with the top players, but he can't go after McDavid and Draisaitl after that game. They did their part. Right now, we're seeing LA be just a deeper team, maybe not skill-wise, but effort wise and doing the right things. So as far as the price goes, I think if you want to bet Edmonton, I'd really wait until they have another slow start again. Hope LA goes up 1-0 and jump in on them. Edmonton are notorious slow starters. Hope they go down 1-0, jump in on them, and ride things out at a better price. Having said that, Jonathan Quick's playing some great hockey, Jeff, and Gabe Morency, he was saying that he thinks the LA this year reminds him of the Canadians last year to a certain degree. Philip Deneau, obviously the same player, shutdown center, getting more offensive minutes. Jonathan Quick playing out of his mind, a good defensive core, lots of young players as well. He wasn't saying it, and I agree with him, that they're going to go the cup or anything like that. But the way they play and the way they win games is not anything that's going to make the ESPN top 10 highlights, but they get the job done. And whether or not people like that style of hockey or not, I don't think they care. They're getting the job done. And Connor McDavid had a quote after the game. He said, if you score 4 goals in the playoffs, you should be able to win the hockey game. And that's what concerns me going into tonight, is that LA didn't play well really defensively and didn't really capitalize on their power plays, and they still won the game.
I agree. I think they're dangerous. And I think Vegas is sitting here just, hey, don't run to the window, all the Edmonton guys. We'll open up another window or two for you. Relax. We got plenty of time. They're taking all the Oiler money in. They're very happy. And what the scary thought is here is the fact that even if Edmonton does win tonight and they do get a game 7, the Kings have to feel confident. Yeah, they wanted to close them out in 6, but they just won in Edmonton, and all the pressure is back on Edmonton again. A game 7, it's the playoffs. We're going to get to the Leafs now in a second, but that pressure is even harder in a game 7. Must win, best player on the planet. What can we do to get out of the first round and win a playoff series?
Yeah. Oh, Jeff, what if I told you if you bet every over tonight, I think at least you'll hit all but one? What do you think when I say that? If you take a look at all the games taking place tonight, if you bet them all over the total, I think you're going to hit all but one in the NHL. What are your thoughts when you think that when I say that? You look at elimination games, you look at what the third periods bring. I know we could see some good goaltending in a Minnesota Wild and St. Louis series. I know that we could see Smith and Quick play well, but between all 4 games we have, I think literally at the worst, you go 3 or 4 on these overs based on the third period overs with elimination games, empty net goals, and just desperation for some of these teams fighting to try and get back in the series.
I see where your eyes are. I agree. The one thing that scares me is DraftKings has the Bruins at a 5.5 juiced over. Everyone else is 6. That's the one game. Does Swayman stand on his head? It's one of those hard fought 2-1, 3-2 games. Or what I'm afraid of is, Carolina gets out, doesn't look back, and the Bruins are right where you are tomorrow. That's what I'm afraid of.
I mean, if I could bet a 5.5, I don't have a DraftKings account, but if I could bet that, I would take it. I think that Bruins aren't going to win a low-scoring hockey game tonight. If the Bruins are successful and force a game 7, the final score is going to look somewhere between 4-3 or 5-3. I truly believe that. Don't get me wrong. You've got a great goaltender in Carolina. You got a great young goalie in Boston. But the way that the 5-on-5 advanced numbers talk about with Carolina, I've talked about how they're a deep team, and even the chances that Boston's creating, I just can't see a low-scoring contest between those two teams. That game tonight, the first period could end 0-0, and I wouldn't bat an eye at that 5.5. I truly believe they're going to size things up. The floodgates will open, but that could be a good one for a third period over for sure.
I'm going to ask you this way, because I'm holding a Toronto series. You're holding a Tampa series. Are you feeling confident the 17-0, the last 17 coming off a loss, and that there will be a game 7?
I wouldn't say I'm dripping with confidence, but I feel good it's going to 7. I think the experience level is what's helping out my confidence, I guess. And playing at home for Tampa Bay, that Vasilevsky stat and just Tampa Bay in general is an unbelievable stat. It's just crazy to think about. But I will say the Maple Leafs getting over that hump of being down in a game in the third period and coming back is huge. But to kind of play the contrarian opinion on the other side of that, they were down in a game. They got their fifth or sixth shot about halfway through the second period. If that happens again in Tampa Bay, Tampa is going to run away with it. And if they do win it and win it in a strong way, all the momentum switches over to Tampa Bay heading into game 7. I don't think I'm too far off from saying first goal of that game, I think, wins the game. We saw that for the first time ever in this series, the last time they met, the first time we saw a team that scored the first goal did not win the game. And I thought that was huge. And I tip my hat to the Maple Leafs for that collective effort. Great play. Marner shoots purposely off the pads and goes right on Matthew's stick. We'll see if they can replicate that again. But I think that we're going to see a game 7. And if we see the Leafs perform the way they did at home in that second half of the game, they're going to be looking pretty good. But I don't know. I can't argue with how I've seen Tampa Bay start their games over their past 3 games. And I feel like if we get that same start out of them we saw last game, then it's going to be hard for Toronto to come back. But let me ask you, because you're holding a Maple Leafs ticket. They had a 3-1 series lead last year against my Canadiens. They've had 3-1 series lead against the Bruins before, but it is a different team, and they're playing really well. They've got some leadership in the room. Do you think that the way they got to this series lead has much to do with how this game pans out versus if they won that game in Toronto, let's say 5-1, instead of the comeback fashion that they got here in? If I'm a Leafs bettor and fan, I actually feel better about that adversity than if it was a walk in the park. Does that make some sense?
100%. And I think Vegas is thinking the same thing because they know about the 17 in a row. Okay. Tampa only opened up -120, knowing that the public and the D-Gens knows about the 17 in a row, knows the 2-time defending champs are back at home. And that number is now as high as 135 at WinBet and South Point. And it'll probably be closer to 140 by opening faceoff.
It's incredible. I find it so interesting the way these numbers shift, from home venue to home venue. I mean, that realistically, that the Boston Carolina series is the most interesting one as far as that goes, because it's just been 2 different teams. A Carolina home versus a Carolina away and vice versa with Boston. This series, we've seen a little bit of that, but we've also seen each team win on the road as well. So look forward to it. I think it's going to be a good one. I think it's very hard for anybody to take an under in that series, isn't it? I mean, all but one, is that what it is? All but one, the series have gone over. And again, it doesn't even matter if it's a slow start. That the second period overs are hitting big time too. If you've got that juice tolerance, make yourself a smoothie and take the second period over, because that could be a good idea too.
Well, speaking of that, we're a half hour in, and I want to give you the board again. There's 4 amazing games. We broke them all down: Carolina, Boston, Toronto, Tampa, Minnesota, St. Louis, Edmonton, LA. All 4 of them 3 games to 2. So elimination games. You talked about it. A million ways to get into these games. The stage is yours. I don't want you to tip your whole card, obviously, but any lanes or nuggets or any ideas and thoughts that you can give all the listeners listening right now?
Well, I'll say one of my favorite bets of the night, it's a prop play, is Braden Point over 2.5 shots on goal. I've been taking these desperate teams, and I took it last night with Chris Kreider over 2.5. He got 4 shots. Tonight, Braden Point, his line's been buzzing. He's a guy that's known more so for playmaking and being a passer, but he will also shoot. And whether or not the Lightning win that game or not, I feel like we'll see some shots on goal from guys like him. So that's -130, Jeff, at most books. But I will say, I talked about these overs. Out of all that I like, I really like the over in the game that's played in the building right behind you right now, I think we'll see goals. I think Boston will get that crowd into it. We'll see Pasta get a goal tonight. We'll see the first period go over 1.5. And no matter who wins that game, I think we'll see an exciting finish and a goal-filled third period. So I'll go over 6 at the plus money, or if you get the 5.5, I think it's well worth it. But I'm confident if people can get the 6, still fine with me.
And I'll close on this end. I saw your timeline talking about the Bruins, and we talked about it last week as we were given the preview. The Bruins lately, historically, I'll say, with this core, it's been first line or bust. And you made a big point about it again. They lose in Carolina. Their first line, nowhere to be found, points and production wise. So if you're expecting scoring and you're expecting goals, would you take a peek at any of those Bruins? You talked about Pasta. Would that be, if you had to pick someone to score tonight, Pasta, Marchand, or whoever you wanted, Pasta would be the one?
I think he'd be the one for me, just because I think he's had that trigger. I think Marchand and Bergeron have looked to pass. They've both been shooting. Realistically, though, the Bergeron shots on goal prop has been one that I should have been on more. We all should be on more. Bergeron shots on goal throughout the playoffs every year seems to be a cash cow. So I'm disappointed I haven't actually made more money on that myself. But for these point props, I'd recommend, if you don't want to go ahead with a goal prop, you can get Bergeron over 1.5 points. And again, what's cool about that is he could have 0 goals tonight, dish one off to Marchand, dish one off to Pastrnak, or a couple guys in the power play, and all of a sudden you cash your ticket. So some of these guys that have such a, they're so highly talked about, theirs isn't 0.5 points over under, it's 1.5. And I think for the Bees tonight, it's really important. Who do you think, Jeff, as a Boston native or a Mass native, who do you think's the secondary guy that could step up? If you were to say a secondary guy steps up tonight, who's that guy?
Well, I mean, the hero play would be McAvoy, but I'm not going to be that hero. I think the no-brainer to me would be Taylor Hall.
Taylor Hall, yeah. Same with me. That's what I was going to say, too. We'll see. Jake DeBrusk, too. I like him. He's a great playoff gamer.
Well, I'm hoping that next Wednesday when we're on, one of us in that will be standing at least. If it's Carolina, let's hope the Pens are standing. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
The scroll has been going the whole time. You can catch Andrew, obviously, at McInnis Picks at Wager Talk, Sports Mayflower. You can run over to YouTube and subscribe right now to Mayflower Sports. It's free. Smash the like button, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell anyone that wants to listen. But the stage is yours, Andrew. Tell them what they got going today, this week, the rest of the playoffs, or whatever you have at Wager Talk.
Yeah, for anybody that is interested in my plays and what I'm releasing right now, I have baseball is going really well for me right now, hitting at 59% to start the season. And I have a deal going right now. If you buy my MLB pass for the entire season, I'm going to throw in the NHL playoffs, the rest of them for free. So if you want my MLB action for after the NHL playoffs end, you jump on MLB now. So that way you get the rest of the NHL for free. So that's what I'm promoting right now, Jeff. Obviously, there's going to be lots of action for me still after the NHL. Everyone knows me as the hockey guy. Trying to get away from that, but it is my thing. It's what I sell the most and the content I do the most, but baseball is off to a great start so far.
Well, we'll be the CFL guys in August, right?
Can't wait.
And then in the fall, we might have to debut something which we're in the works, which we will talk a lot more about. But you might be seeing Mr. Andrew a little more than you did this spring. How's that sound?
That sounds good to me.
So anyone wagering and investing today, please do it responsibly. If you do have a problem, ask for help. There's an 800 number available. Why, you ask? Myself and Andrew care. We want to see you here today, tomorrow, next week, next month through 2022 and beyond. From myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, from Andrew McInnis at McInnis Picks and Wager Talk. We wish everyone a blessed day, a good evening. Enjoy the NHL and NBA playoffs, and we will see you soon here at ECSI.